Welcome, you curious potatoes! My name is Zero, and this is my 100% complete full course for the hero Freya. If you're unfamiliar with the term, this means that this video is pretty massive. And this video right here is part 1 of 3. I got your back. There will be timestamps posted below in the description, as well as a little kind of guidance or thing called an overlay over the video showing you what we're talking about. And that way, if you just scroll through, you'll know what we're talking about at all times. So hopefully that will help. Otherwise, let's just get straight into it. I personally think that Freya is one of the more complicated heroes to play, and for reasons you'll learn about later on in the video. There's a disclaimer, of course, I am not a pro, so everything in this guide is based off of my experience and observation, as well as some community input from a lot of other players and friends of mine. I do play Freya a lot, so I do know what I'm talking about, just not a pro. Like any other hero, we're gonna start off with the basics, so let's take a quick look at her kit, but we won't be reading it in Moonton speak, as I call it, we'll read it in English. So let's talk about her skill 1 first. This is called the Leap of Faith, and it has enhanced effects based on the amount of orbs you have. The first 2 orb stacks give you 20% more damage than, the base skill damage. Basically meaning if you jump without any orbs, it does X damage. And if you have 2 orb stacks, it does 20% more damage and a 0.4 second stun. If you get 4 orb stacks, that's a 40% damage boost from 20, giving it a total of 60% damage boost from the base and a 0.8 second stun. And of course, finally, at full orb stacks, this skill will do 100% more damage than the base, as well as give a longer 1.2 second stun. And it is also able to pull enemies toward the center of the area effect, kind of like Tigreal's ult, but faster. This skill is affected by flicker only on max orbs. It also takes 70% of your extra physical attack and adds it to the base damage. The extra physical attack is the green stat in your attack section when you click on the stat column. The reason the devs did not make this a total physical attack skill is because the base damage alone is already 600 when fully maxed out on orbs, if the skill is fully upgraded. Please note that using this skill will consume any and all orbs you may have stacked. Spear combo is her source of sustain and crowd control post-ultimate. It has the same area of effect range as her basic attacks in her ultimate mode. This is a triangular or cone-shaped area in front of the direction she aims this skill. This skill also consumes 2 orbs in order to be cast. However, the first cast of this skill does not consume any orbs at all. What this means is that there is a total of 4 casts, with the 4th cast having a 0.5 second AoE knockup. The last knockup also has enhanced damage based on your total physical attack, and the shield this skill provides is, once again, based on the smaller green extra physical attack stat bonus. It sounds bad on paper, but what it means is that the game really tries to help you out in terms of your sustain if you try to go burst on Freya, and give you at least enough to kill your target while staying alive. It's very important to cast this skill in the right order, because if you consume your skill 1 and all of your orbs are used, then you have no crowd control CC left from now on. If only there were a way to get your orbs full just instantly after jumping. Wait. Right, her ultimate. So Valkyrie Descent, which is for some reason considered a morph skill, like Nana's skill 2, instantly regenerates all 6 orbs up for Freya. This skill turns her into a full tilt War Angel, and she gains a multi-target, also known as Splash, and a ranged skill, meaning that anything in a cone shape, the same as her skill 2, takes equal damage from her basic attacks. This is kind of like 1v1ing everyone in front of you at the same time. It also gives a massive shield, since this is the one that's based on the total physical attack bonus. It also has a base of 600, 750, and 900 shield at levels 1, 2, and 3. Likewise, scaling with the skill upgrades, the attack bonus given from this skill is 30, 50, and 70. 70 is a lot, it's like having an extra item. But it can make up for the lack of Blade of Despair if you opt to go for more tanky than bursty. Unfortunately, the skill can be interrupted by crowd control effects, and the window of time is smaller than Hayabusa's ultimate skill cast delay, so it isn't that bad, but it still exists. Luckily, it doesn't get consumed and on cooldown if it gets interrupted though. You can still just wait until you're not crowd control and then cast it. So let's move on to her passive, the Power of Enheryar. Now this thing right here is why she is such a huge threat to whatever lane she is in. Every single skill cast, regardless of the orb amount, generates 2 stacks of max attack speed attacks. She can only hold 6 of these max attack speed stacks, but in a real battle, these stacks are quite easy to achieve because of her 4-phase skill 2. In theory, if you used all of your skills properly, Freya can use 20 max attack speed attacks in a consecutive series. And if you're asking right now, well, how is this any good, Zero? Well, early game, it means that she can easily jungle, clear waves, and have nice crowd control from her skill 2 alone. What makes it lethal? Well, the fact that she can launch a huge barrage on any tower when left alone, especially even if she has no attack speed items. That's what makes her so good as a solo laner. Of course, in teamfights it's also pretty toxic since you do gain that ranged attack that hits everything in front of her from her effect of her Valkyrie mode. Let's move on to the next section, shall we? We'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the video about what makes her a great choice for solo queue, as well as 3-man teams. And if you're viewing the segmented version of this is on the last of the sectioned videos. Anyways, 5-man teams I will not mention because, you know, those team comps usually are designed around the potential of the sync of the squad. However, let me just say that she is guaranteed 1 lane pressure and can hold off her lane as good as Uranus can, for reference. I do enjoy the way they reworked her kit, and think that even though they made it extremely complex now, she offers way more per battle than most other heroes in the game. This is because Freya can use multiple different playstyles based on her items, her emblem, and her battle spell. The playstyles are listed as follows: tank, off-tank, sustain type fighter, a burst type fighter, and of course a burst type assassin. The only difference, by the way, between the sustain and the burst fighter is the choice of battle spell. So let me get into that real quick and break down each playstyle as well. Please note that I will discuss the builds I am about to show, as well as talk way more in depth about other item choices near the end of this video. Again, if you're viewing this segmented part, it's the last video in the series. You know, this stuff usually takes a lot of time to talk about, so if you're interested in that, go ahead and go on to that video. Anyway, Tank Freya is achieved by taking this top build for Freya. You'll want to build Beast Killer as your jungle stacks are gained. I usually prefer to get Pillager Axe before any boots early game. And another thing is, guys, if you can't jungle due to the enemy team, skip the jungle item and replace it with Antique Cuirass or the Brute Force Breastplate. So yeah, Max Tank Freya is achieved by not only taking the top build here, but also by taking Vengeance as well as the tank emblem set with the Tenacity talent. This is optimized for magic res, which is Freya's biggest weakness. As a tank, you can always sacrifice that Malefic Roar slot for a counter build item, although I wouldn't recommend it, for example if you would replace it with Blade Armor, since she does have a knockup for Claude, and Vengeance can handle DHS pretty well. Off-tank Freya is achieved by taking the top build and using Purify or Flicker, as well as the tank emblem set. Sustain Fighter Freya is achieved by taking the middle build, the Fighter emblem, and Vengeance. Burst Fighter is achieved by taking the middle build, the Fighter emblem, and Purify or Flicker. Note that for either Fighter emblem, the Festival of Blood by the way also works fine, but the difference with Disabling Strike is actually quite noticeable on Freya. Burst Assassin is achieved by taking the bottom build, your jungle item of preference, which can be sold late game for Wotak and Oracle, and the Assassin emblem with the Killing Spree talent. This one is super squishy, but it's also super lethal, so make sure you play her correctly and don't take any unnecessary risks when doing so. Alright, let's do a quick recap on the battle spells and explain when you would take each. Flicker is great when your team lacks a proper engager hero like a Kufra or a Grok, since she can drag enemies with S1 and Flicker. Again, make sure you have all orbs. Purify is my favorite option though, since like any fighter, slowdowns, and crowd control are always going to be their biggest weaknesses. Vengeance is, of course, always well appreciated when the enemy decides to completely focus all attacks on you. The only thing I would say is to not take Vengeance versus Magic Burst enemies like Lilia or Aurora. Here's a couple of examples of Vengeance doing its job in, prolonged team fights. Her emblem choices should always be based on what your team comp lacks. If you think you lack a secondary tank, someone who can survive in team fights but still do damage, or if you think your team literally took no marksman or assassin, so now you need a killer, Freya can do all of them, but not all at once. Alright, so we're in the combo chain section, guys, and now that we've gone over the basics, let's go ahead and talk about them. With 4 separate casts on skill 2, I know that you know how varied these things can be, but I will only show the 2 that matter the most, with or without flicker. Freya's maximum damage combo is a full charge skill 1, an ultimate cast, and then a complete skill 2 spam. This ensures that you get max damage from skill 1, and since your ultimate resets your orbs to max, you don't need to punch anything to reload all of those orbs. Technically speaking, you would want to use your passive super speed to attack as much as possible in between, but some battles against some basic attack immune heroes, or battles where you absolutely need that shield from skill 2, outweigh the potentially wasted stacks from your attack speed boosted attack. Whew, that's a mouthful. The only difference between the 2 combo sets with flicker is that you flicker in the direction you want to drag your enemies, but the spam skill 2 is still going to happen right after your ultimate. Otherwise, when roaming and jungling or split pushing a tower, I would recommend the max attack speed combo. Just make sure your enemies are far away since it does sacrifice your blink. When approaching towers that have no enemies guarding it, the best way to do so, even when low on orbs, is to start auto-attacking the tower, while wasting skill 2 to gain your enhanced basic attacks. If you waste your jump immediately after, even with no orbs, you will still gain those 2 enhanced basic attacks. This means that you have a total of 10 full speed auto attacks on a tower in a short period of time. You can do the same thing while jungling for ultra fast jungle clearing. Another small section here, guys, is the one about laning in general, top, mid, or bot. So there's only a few things you can take for granted in this game, and one of them is that Freya will have a map presence in whichever lane she is in. She is capable of fending off 2 enemies with ease. Any more than that and she will need her ultimate and her tower. I will explain how to play Freya in each lane alone, and then I will explain how to do it with backup. So let's go from top to bottom. When playing solo top with Freya, you have the choice of proxying or cutting the enemy minion wave before it arrives to clash with yours. This is a standard fighter practice. Your wave clear potential early game is on par with that of Sylvanas or Grox for reference. If you do cut the lane and there are no enemies in sight, it means they are most likely getting the red buff. You can use this window of time to farm their top jungle monster and the small one that appears right after, granting you 2 future jungle stacks. Once you are done with this, you can farm the small crab and then go clear wave number 2, which is extremely important, especially after this update where the first 2 waves matter a lot as a solo laner. After that, you can go and clear your own top monster or go ahead and get that second crab. It depends on what spawns first and how proficient you are at clearing those waves. I personally like to keep all of my stacks ready for my maximum skill 1 jump damage, so just to gank that second crab, just based on if the enemy has retribution or not and how low that crab's HP is. If there's only 1 enemy against you, doing this is way easier. All in all, doing this early game for top lane will grant you up to 4 jungle stacks and 3 wave clears easily. Sometimes it isn't possible, but I do recommend trying to do this whenever you can. If the mid lane is getting ganked, you can rotate to provide support for mid, but if not, I would recommend putting maximum pressure on the top lane, forcing the tank and the marksman to stay near you, and denying their jungle or roaming capacity. Eventually, exerting too much pressure on top lane will guarantee a 4 to 5 man gank from the enemy team, so be prepared to handle that. The safest way for an enemy to do this is by cutting your wave, and then ganking you under your tower as soon as their wave arrives. The best thing for you to do in this scenario is to use your S1 to group up all of the incoming minions. Go into ultimate mode to get your shield, and then spam skill 2 at the minions. This will clear the wave inside of your tower, as well as knock up anyone who came to dive you. Purify and Vengeance are MVP battle spells in this scenario. The risky way of them ganking you is by them risking 2 tanks to gank you and share tower damage. In this case, they probably have a lot of CC and ranged attacks. If this happens, make sure to try to stay outside of the ranged attacks as much as possible, while trying to keep the 2 tanks crowd control inside your tower. You have a really big shield on your side, and of course, depending on your emblem set, it can be really difficult to kill you. Rinse and repeat this as often as needed, and keep exerting pressure on the top lane, follow team requests as needed, but don't just randomly sacrifice yourself for no reason. So let's keep it rolling, and let's keep in mind as well that these scenarios that I'm about to talk about can sometimes be unrealistic, but even in unrealistic scenarios, it's better to know what to do than to just run around blindly. So, in the rare case you get unleashed as the mid lane Freya alone, you're gonna need to be a little bit more cautious of the first wave and clear it only after you know enemies are gone. The next thing to do is kill one of those little healing monsters on the side, then circle back to the mid lane and clear the second wave. And if there's no one else on your team that needs that blue buff, go ahead and get it for yourself. Being mid with Freya usually means that your team is expecting you to help them out with the gank, but if you want to maximize your early game, you need to do a counter gank. All it means is that you wait near the brush for the right time to strike, while the enemy team is ganking either your bot lane or your top lane. Then bam, go Valkyrie on them when they least expect it. The other possible scenario is that they all try to gank you in mid. In this case, do what you do in top lane, follow the normal cautious playstyle, save that S1 and ult for when they all decide it's time to tower dive for that War Angel. Now bot lane is a bit weird, so disclaimer applies here as well. Free solo access to bot lane unlocks Burst Assassin Freya by default. Play her as you would any normal carry. Farm your red buff, and play similar to top lane. The only difference here is that if this does happen and you're free in the bot lane, you will probably be fighting another offlaner. And with the red buff, trust me, very few fighters can even stand a chance versus Freya. Nevertheless, the opportunity or possibility of a gank on you is still possible, but with more access to your brush, you could always rotate around the enemies leading them to think that they just got a free tower and then start whacking them in the face with your massive axe. Usually letting Freya free farm is a very bad choice, as she can single-handedly wipe out a whole enemy team if built properly. So let's rewind a bit now. Back to the top lane. This time we will describe what to do in the top lane, but with backup. Now this can vary a bit depending on who is taking the aggressive role between you or your ally. If you are taking the lead, make sure you know the limits of your ally's skills, and if there's enough hero synergy, try to invade for and steal the red buff. If you manage to successfully steal the red buff, then make sure to clear as much of the enemy jungle as possible, denying them of most of their farm. Take advantage of this or any momentum and split up after your initial battles to, help gank mid. While you as a Freya stays to pressure the top lane, just remember to rejoin for the second red buff invasion. You'll see a gray icon where the red buff was at that lets you know when it will respawn in 15 seconds. Similarly, if you have backup in mid lane, which is usually going to be a mage most of the time, but yeah, if you have mid lane backup, and if that mid laner is one that is really good at invasions, or perhaps even the tank is helping out early mid game, which is also a common occurrence, then you can lead the vanguard in blue buff invasion world. The only thing I would recommend here is that you save your second skill's knock-up phase to crowd control the enemy who has retribution, so that your mage or tank can steal the buff safely. However, if your mid laner is not one who can invade early game, such as Aurora, Gord, Odette, or other similar heroes, then you can help them jungle and get the blue buff, as well as serve as a deterrent for enemy invaders. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about may also be rare, but damn do I love it. This can happen in trios, or if you guys have some trolls on your team that decided not to grab a tank last minute and instead got another fighter or something else. I'm talking about bot lane Freya, but with support. I realize that bot lane Freya with support in terms of her being the carry is unrealistic, so I will save my opinions on that, and instead just instruct you on how to be a super aggressive tank Freya that can both peel, gank, and crowd control for your marksmen, as well as help push and secure objectives. My personal recommendation is that you play how normal tanks play, but try to stay hidden a lot more than usual so that you can jump on the enemies and let your marksman land a series of punches in real easy. If it's hard to gank a tank Freya when she's alone, it's even harder when she has damage backing her up. Plus, your marksman won't flame you if they see your tank emblem, which is always nice. So that's it for this section of the video, of this series of videos. Just wanna, make a couple of pointers here. The next ones will be talking about what makes Freya kind of difficult, a little bit more explanations here about the stuff you need to know with when you use Freya, and as well as different ganking styles, variabilities on her. And of course we're also going to start talking about her strengths and weaknesses, both as a hero in terms of her kit, and also based on actual enemy heroes, both in synergy and counter picking. So strengths and weaknesses, full thing. The next video is going to be pretty long, as you can tell. So thanks for watching if you've come so far. Zero out.